ready to taste some wine, gentlemen. So we're going to start with some Barrasan wines.
Great. We're going to start out with our Barrasan Merlot. It's an '06 vintage, which I'm particularly proud and impressed with what we were able to do with it, Tom, because to me it was really expressed on how big a Merlot you could make, and by kind of putting the right components and the right efforts in there, we made a big Merlot out of this wine.
Yeah, I was very pleased with it myself, and I attribute that mostly to the grower. Made my life very simple.
What was the season like for 2006? I mean, what were some of the
Well, considering it was 3 years ago and they all start to blend together. But you know, actually the thing about our vintages and really even since we started making wine here at Balboa and Barrasan, the thing that we've noticed is we've clicked every year with great vintages. I mean, where the weather's been great, the fruit's developed, we've had great intensities and colors and flavors. I mean, it's like year after year, which is, I guess, why we grow grapes and make wine in Washington, because we have such a great climate here.
Very consistent.
But 2006 was certainly a year that I think we had a lot of hang time because we had a long season. It was a typical year, and in that we had a lot of sunshine. The fruit developed great, and we picked it early September, but it was the right time. I mean, in other words, we didn't need to overextend hang time on it. It was really a great year for growing grapes.
And it was '06 was what we had a freeze in '04, and '05 was the first year back, and '06 was, I think, for me, when we started to see similar things that we saw in '03 prior to the freeze in '04.
Well, one of the things that we've been looking at on Merlot is that as a varietal, the canopy tends to kind of hang and sag, and so there's a lot of issues with shade and light penetration into it, and sometimes even overcropping and large clusters. And so one of the things we've tried to do is some different canopy technologies and approaches. And at this particular vineyard, or the Walliser vineyard, we divided the canopy in what they call a smart dice, in which we divide the canopy in half and goes two different directions. What that does is it opens up the center, but still creates enough leaf surface to protect the fruit, but really opens it up with a lot of sunlight. And so this is something we've looked at for several years now, and I think we've been pretty pleased with how that's
Still
gone.
doing it, yep.
So given what we talked about with what was happening in the vineyards this year, and given your expressed philosophy of letting the grape shine through,
This would be a,
what are you both smelling and tasting as we taste this
well,
wine?
since we started making wine in 2001, I think it's truly an expression of Merlot from Walliser Vineyard, which is what we're trying to accomplish. Big Merlot from Walla Walla Valley.
Yeah, and fruit. A lot of
Yeah.
fruit stands out in it. When you taste that, the fruit I think really stands out, and it's bright, and it's deep, and it's dark for Merlot, I think.
Yeah.
It's interesting as I've tasted Merlots around here from these vineyards. I don't know that sometimes that I could blind taste them and tell the difference between
Yeah.
Cabernet and Merlot.
Yeah, it would be tough. It's really tough. Yeah.
It's outstanding.
If we had more time, I would tell you the Christoph story
Yeah,
on
right.
Merlot, but that'll have to be another day.
We'll save that for another video.
Yeah.
It's terrific.
Cheers.
Well, our next wine here that we're going to try is Cabernet Sauvignon from the same vineyard.
Okay.
And I've found Cab to be one of the more challenging grapes we've had, in that a lot of the varieties, when the vineyards are younger, can express themselves, particularly with the bright fruit like we were talking about on the Merlot. But Cab traditionally will have a lot more complexities and flavor profiles in it that you want to go beyond just fruit. And so trying to get the Cab to develop those complexities has always been a huge challenge, and maybe even more so on the rocks. Rocks meaning our soils that are a dry riverbed soil with all those cobblestones, in that the Cab really struggled to develop in the early years, and it really took a long time in trying to figure out how to grow Cab on there, whereas Syrah and Merlot And Cab Franc, I think, were very successful from the get-go. But Cab was more of a struggle, and I think it was really more about understanding the approaches to what we needed to do in growing Cab. And so we've developed over the years on Cab, going from maybe a little strong on the fruit profiles to where now we're getting what maybe you'd call the terroir, the minerality, and the spices and the peppery notes and things like that would come from that unique soil that we're growing this on. And so I think Cab was the slowest to come around to expressing what we were looking for, but it's also probably the most expressive next to Cab Franc of what we're trying to achieve in those vineyards.
Yeah, and really from a winemaking standpoint, starting to see a little more tannins, starting to see a little more consistency in the fruit that we're getting every year. Those first years as that, like trying to find itself, really it was not the same, and now in 05, 06, 07, we're starting to see really more consistencies coming from that vineyard, and it's great.
The nose on this is outrageous.
Yeah.
One of the things I've always, as a vineyardist, expressed in explaining to people about vineyard age and what we're trying to achieve in the vineyards is I've tried to compare it to, if you think of to people. For example, like when you first plant a vineyard, it's like an infant. It doesn't know what it's doing. It needs really strong care, and you got to babysit it through all those processes of growing till it's strong enough to be on its own. Then all of a sudden you get it to where it's that toddler or that young stage where it's in grade school, and it's learning and it's expressing itself, but you're still having to kind of babysit it. Then all of a sudden you get into the teenage years, which are the early years of bearing fruit, and you end up with it being basically unruly and wants to just grow vine, and it doesn't want to do what you want it to do, and it's hard to work with, and you've got to ground it, and you got to spank it, and you got to do all those things that you might do to teenagers. And so eventually you get through that process to where you get to where it's mature. It's an adult, and it knows that it's supposed to focus on the fruit. It's not supposed to just run wild out there and grow vines. And so once you can get your vineyard into that adult stage where it knows what it's doing and it's focused on the job, that's when you've arrived as a vineyard. And so I think all these wines now express that.
Right. Took some time.
Really similar to, I think, from the winemaking standpoint, where there was years that the young fruit we were getting, really I didn't like it, wanted to dump it down the drain.
Right.
You know, it just hadn't developed.
But you gave it time.
But you give it time, and it comes back around, and then you have something that you can work with, and it ends up, it's a learning process for us too. We're starting with a vineyard, never made wine there before, and then to watch it come to something that you can put in a bottle and really enjoy is
Rewarding.
it's rewarding. It is.
Well, the Cab's terrific.
Yeah, cheers.